And as we approach the last half of the day after lunch, I know there's a temptation to close your eyes and have a nap. I encourage you to stay with us. If you do need to go out and grab a cup of coffee, by all means do, but don't miss the initial presentations, because I think this is going to be fascinating. The discussion around AI, drones, and advanced technology can become a little bit technical. But our panel today is going to guide you through the broader issues. The broader issues about the impacts on commercial activities, shipping in the South China Sea and in maritime environments. But not just commercial activities, which are so vital to the South China Sea, but warfare. How will drones and AI impact defense, deterrence, and the conduct of war? And finally, through our presentation, we'll come back to what this all means for safety, security in the maritime environment and in the South China Sea. So I hope you'll all enjoy the journey that we put you on. I want to note that this panel is probably the most anticipated panel of the conference. AI, autonomous vehicles, drones has been mentioned at least once in each of the panels, and now we have a chance to do a deep dive. For example, panelists have discussed the disruption of AI in many fields, including in information, maritime domain awareness, as well as disinformation. They've talked about the legality or illegality of drone strikes in the past. And they've talked about the impacts of autonomous vehicles, at least, on gray zone tactics. We have even had in this very hall accusations of drone flies. So if you thought this was science fiction, it's real. All of this with a view to looking at what will the impacts be on the safety, reliability, and very importantly, the accountability of states in the maritime environment. I'm also very delighted to have a gender-balanced panel, and I want to thank the organizers for granting me with the privilege of having a gender-balanced panel. I want to just say a word about why this is important. Minister West from the UK, in responding to a question, mentioned the fact that technology and gender responsiveness need to go hand in hand. And when we talk about AI, we have to recognize that artificial intelligence is not neutral. There are biases built in. We have to go the extra mile to combat our stereotypes, our biases, and our misunderstandings. And so I'm really delighted that we have a variety of perspectives on this panel. Let me introduce them briefly. We have Dr. Ossian Zelbedia, Director of the Armament and Defense Economics Domain at the Institute for Strategic Research at the Military School in France. Professor Dimitrios Dalaklis, Professor at the World Maritime University. Mr. Nico Lange, Senior Fellow of the Munich Security Conference. And Ms. Jane Chan, Senior Fellow and Coordinator, Maritime Security Program at the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Nanyang Technological University, Singapore. And without further delay, I'm going to pass the floor to Ossian. Ossian, you've said that, I think in your abstract, that AI can be a lever of power to collective action. I'm fascinated to learn what that is.
Thank you very much, Sharon. I'm deeply honored to take part on this fantastic session, and I want to express my sincere thanks to Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam and ASIWA invitation. So I'm very pleased today to speak about this session dedicated to artificial intelligence, and I would like to focus on the power lever and the collective action regarding drones in the maritime domain. And it's why I ask about this question about will artificial intelligence change the way of using naval drones and from this level power to collective action. So, first of all, it's important to remember that drones are not new. As you see, it started in 1998, so the end of the 19th century. So it's not new, and it's important to say it. Nikola Tesla, you see on the picture, was a Serbian engineer who makes presentation at Madison Square Garden in New York, present a remote control and patent radio control robot boat. And for the little history, he used radio waves to move this robot boat in a small pool. So he focused on electricity, which was the core of his invention. And I want to underline this just to show you about the evolution technology, because there is more than a century later. We are today on this session, and we are speaking about unmanned system, about powerful system with hybrid energy and challenging, IA. And to understand this grow up, it's why I propose this session of reflection and to speak about this evolution. So their widespread use could be explained by the fact that the technology has become increasingly accessible, costless, and easy to use. And due to miniaturization of their components and payloads, so they become more and more smaller, and finally open the door to numerous actors. Some speakers spoke about these things yesterday, but it's important to say about this opening door about a lot of actors. The maritime environment is hostile and demanding one, and generally, drones seem to meet these requirements, in particular their rusticity and cutting-edge technologies of which they are composed. So, maritime drones have a wide range of civilian and military application, and I want to underline this particularity, and because to understand what is evolving about the context on the sea, and I think it will grow up, and about a lot of mission with drones, and why this question mark, it's to think about what is the new issues we can expect it, and we can open the reflection like from the new space to the deep sea, like the seabed space, and it's like the same challenges as this new space, and to take the power and fierce competition. And there is a growing dispute over the right to explore the seabed, and autonomous and AI will play a big role. And in this case of underwater drones, the development IA not only offers obvious operational benefits, but also an interesting answer to the limitation of underwater communication. So there is a real dynamic on this integration, and accuracy, performance, and security and accuracy. So through the artificial intelligence capacity for autonomy, the protection, the data stream will no longer be crucial. So it's why it changed maybe. It's why we can question about rupture and breaking rules about that, and breaking technology. So we are not protect against a malicious actor diverting drones from their routes or worlds causing collide and cannot be ruled out. So zero risk does not exist fully. And there is a special attention about, I said, about the dual characteristic about drones. And we spoke a bit yesterday about smart ship, and it opens a lot of using new technology, not only artificial intelligence, but about virtualization, Internet of Things, IoT, and connectivity. So it changed the scope of the maritime domain and full of actors, civilian actors, states, non-actors. So it makes like the fog of war of Clausewitz, can we speak about? So it takes more precision, as I said, accuracy, security, but at the other side, it makes more complex to challenges. And regarding this increased development, there is a lot of incident nowadays. You can read on the international press, and like repeated capture of small underwater system or aerial drones stranded at sea in the area of South China Sea. So it's growing up more and more. And we spoke about gray zone a lot of, and I think it's the main point to challenge this gray zone and technology, and to be adapted, and how to apply this technology to maritime domain challenges. And I propose about some reflection. Are we jumping towards a new model, and how we can challenge it? 5 blocks to reflect about that, and how to highlight these needs, the risk, and how to be resilient about that. There is a lot of points we can develop on this. And what it's important to say and to remind that is a great rise of strategic interest in South China Sea, and both growing up technology. So there is a lot of challenges, and thinking about new model is really important, and it's really essential to think in the direction of a common consciousness. We spoke a bit large this morning about this common consciousness. I can give, for example, about on March 2024, European Parliament adopted IA Act, which aims to ensure safety, ethical and dynamic IA system promoting common value. And ultimately, through commonality of IA, there could be greater understanding between states, and dialogue could be fostered. So this process of common reflection is already underway at the last event in South Korea on the 9 and 10 September of this year. And next event about IA to be held in Paris on February 10 and 11 February 2025, France will host a summit for action on artificial intelligence, and bringing together heads of states and a lot of international organizations, researchers, a lot of actors, civilian society. And maybe we can go ahead, the famous black box, and it bias could be overcome. That is important. Who cares on the black box, and put the tools inside. And in conclusion, I can say there is a lot of challenges regarding autonomous machine, and the balance of power and international relation could be severely tested if certain norms are not put in place. So the common work of international and European engineers and lawyers are essential, I think so. And in the future, we need to where we want to place the cursor on these different gaps, and to appropriate combine technology and to guarantee future requirements. Thank you for your attention.
Merci, Ocean. You've given us a really, in that last slide in particular, a great overview of the issues that come together. As you've said, drones and artificial intelligence coming together can be a powerful tool, but it can also be a powerful tool as a dual-use tool for nefarious actors, and the world has to catch up in regulating that technology. The competition's fierce. Technology, AI can be helpful for efficiencies, commercial efficiencies in shipping. What Dimitrios, should we be watching for in the shipping industry?
Your Excellencies, distinguished guest participants, good afternoon. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers, the Vietnam Diplomat Academy, for their kind invitation to participate in this event. It is always a very pleasant experience in the academic world to be able to provide input in events such as this one. And I look forward to the interaction with such a wide and diverse audience. Now, I'll have the audacity of expose our moderator. In our last coordinator meeting, he said, we need to ensure, no matter what, that you don't fall asleep. He even suggested to use scare tactics about this one, and I said, yes, of course, I can be quite innovative, especially when you are in an island and you need to use a boat to go to the mainland. So let me ask for your attention and do follow the slides, because my presentation is quite heavy, and in a limited period of time, it is impossible to supplement the necessary verbiage. Very quickly, I will introduce you to my mother institution, the World Maritime University, which is based in Malmö, Sweden. I want to highlight that the IMO Secretary General is also serving as the Chancellor of the university. And although my presentation is not political sensitive, I will still throw you my classical disclaimer that the argumentation and responses provided in this event are personal and should not be affiliated with the World Maritime University or any other entity in the United Nations framework. Now, diving into the content of the presentation, for those that believe that the Industrial Revolution is over, I regret to inform you that this idea is wrong. It's not only the steam engine, it's not only electricity and the assembly line, it's not only what was wrongly attributed as the IT revolution, which is simply the introduction of computers and IT in our everyday life. Today we are experiencing the fourth stage of the Industrial Revolution. So not only we have digitized our information, but we have also digitalized our business models. I guess everybody's carrying one of those. If you want to buy a train, you go to the app. Very quickly, I'm continuing forward. CPIC is already operating in the era of digitalization. So we are talking about digital business model, and there are disruptive trends that are influencing the way we work. And in the university, we have tried to identify those trends. And why is that? Because a very significant difference is that today the world around us, it is changing fast, and we tried to see the impact of job profiles and especially identify future job profiles. And in order to do that, we have deployed two different research phases. The first one was termed the future of work. So we were looking in 2040 in the various modalities of transport. What will be the future? We call it educated guesses. And more importantly and more recently is the impact of technology on seafarers. That was the idea to identify what will be the future of shipping. And this is how the discussion about autonomous vessels or mass-type vessels came into the forward of attention. If you want to identify the possible future, yes, conventional ships will still continue to operate in the near future, but they will become more and more digital and full of IT applications. For those that have a seafarer background, let me just remind you, from radar to ECDIS. And there is also the mass-type vessel. I will provide the definition later on. Definitely, we have remote-controlled vessels, and because I was asked last night Is autonomous vessel a reality? Yes, it is. It's not a future issue. They are already here with us. So if we want to have a look on those technologies, I'm not certain if you can read, but definitely I have put a right circle that the most influential technology that we have identified in our study is numerous artificial intelligence applications. Trying to get in time, I am inviting you to visit our website. You can download both these reports and you can utilize at your own convenience. Now, favorite topic of academics, definitions. I regret to inform you that unfortunately we are using the terms unmanned and autonomous ships interchangeably. That is totally wrong. An unmanned ship is one which has no crew or human operator on board. So the question how we will intervene if or when things go wrong. A remote operator can do this, or even in the near future, we will simply launch what we call service robots. Moving forward with the discussion, an autonomous vessel, by contrast, is one which is equipped with suitable system that can steer the ship and make decisions about any change in control settings without human intervention. So the easiest way to distinguish between the two types of ships is no human in the loop. And of course, autonomous ships may be manned or unmanned. It is still the artificial intelligence application that can do the necessary navigation or decisions about the safety of the ship. So MASS, the acronym MASS is an acronym used by the International Maritime Organization to describe commercial vessels that operate with little or no human intervention using various sources to gather the necessary data to support the safety of navigation and the necessary decision making. And of course, artificial intelligence application or tools are needed in order to operate this type of ships. And here we have the Yara Birkeland, which is a very identifiable example of a ship that it is reaching the greatest autonomous level. And with that, we can see the ship has completed sea acceptance trial and is now ready to dive into normal commercial operation. So put everything into perspective, here is an abstract of the official category for those describing MASS type vessels. And you can see definitely we're having 1, 2, 3. We are researching number 4, and there is a significant number of ships that are about to become fully operational at the 4th level of this category. I am moving forward about artificial intelligence. I have thrown a couple of definitions. My own personal definition is computer programs that can make decisions on their own, because simply we are trying to mimic the function of the human brain. In reality, we are gathering information with our senses, then we are processing that information to facilitate reasoning and make decisions. And here you can see a portfolio of technologies that are already available in order to facilitate those tasks. Continuing forward, I want you to simply note that there are today artificial intelligence applications all around us. And for shipping, an example that is easy for everybody to understand is weather routing. By collecting the necessary or the correct type of data, the system will simply choose the best and safest passage on our behalf. So we have already started outsourcing the necessary decision-making to artificial intelligence applications. I will guide you through this one. I can also see Sean's eyes that are flashing because of the pressure of time. So basically, the IMO ran an evaluation of what needs to be done in the future through the regulatory scoping exercise. The idea for the IMO is to adopt a goal-based means based on performance mass code. the mass code will hopefully cover many legal gaps that today exist in the operation. And here I am providing some clarifications in terms of operation. In my young days as a naval officer, I used to be involved in air control traffic activities. So for me, a lot of legal attributes and definitions that I see towards the creation of the mass code is following the aviation industry in the past. More work and especially. So for the time being, the idea is that a human will always be responsible for the mass type vessel. In reality, we are simply trying to utilize the concept of the captain in a different format. Basically, the IMO is pushing hard, but it is not an easy task to do. So what happened? We recently revised the plan, and the idea is that by the 1st of July 2030, so it is just 6 years from now, the new code will come into force and will be effective just 2 years later, so 2032, even with the revision. And since we are counting just seconds, mass type vessels are already here. It's not a futuristic idea. I'm listing there a couple of benefits. Yes, a reduced number of crews is already the norm today, where automation on board ships is helping the conduct of navigation. However, in the near future, those number of crew members will reduce even further. And the idea is that in order to have level 4 of mass, we need applications that will be able to make decisions by themselves. And here I'm using an organic form of definition with no human input. And closing, to answer the main question of the panel, no, AI cannot autocorrect. In reality, as the moderator already highlighted, it is expected that someone will train this application. And let me remind you, good trainer, good performance of the student. Bad trainer, bad performance of the student. And with that, I would like to thank you, and I'm open for any questions during the question and answer session.
Thank you, Dimitrios, for clarifying the definitions and the levels of automation. Level 4 is a significant development, but as you've said, there are benefits to AI use and efficiency of shipping. I'm going to ask Nico to talk about how that applies in the military sphere.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the possibility of being here. I'm for the first time in Vietnam, so I'm learning a lot during the last days. Thank you to the Diplomatic Academy and to the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung for having me here. One thing that I learned yesterday and today is that there's a discussion in this room and in the whole region whether there is a cold war or a hot war or maybe a lukewarm war or a gray zone war. What I am reporting here today is my focus of work, which unfortunately is a real war that is going on in Europe right now. Russia's war against Ukraine and Ukrainians' defense against the Russian aggression. And reporting from this war, I can just confirm what we heard before, talking about autonomous vehicles and AI in war. It's not a theoretical question or an abstract question of something that might be happening in the future. It is happening right now in Ukraine. It is leading to dramatic shifts in how warfare is conducted. And I think everybody who understands this transformation faster and implements this into procurement, into military planning, into structure, doctrine, and training of their own armed forces will be able to be successful in defense and deterrence. And I'm saying it in that way because from my point of view, this is not something we can theorize about for a long time. It's about practical implications and decisions that have to be made right now. I see in my country, in Germany, we are largely investing in military capabilities we needed 15 years ago. And I'm concerned if we are really investing into the military capabilities we need now and in the future. I'm afraid we don't, but that is true not only for my country, it's true for other countries as well. But it's, I think, just polite to criticize my own country and not criticize other countries. The main lesson I see on the battlefield in Ukraine is best explained by examples. Ukraine was attacked by Russia with a full-scale attack in February 2022. And you are all aware that Russia was always very proud of the Black Sea Fleet stationed in Sevastopol on Crimea. It is part of the conversation about Russian predominance in the Black Sea and in the Crimea. Very, very important element for Russia to have the Black Sea Fleet. Now let's look 2.5 years into this war, let's look, where's the Black Sea Fleet? And you would be amazed if you would learn, if you don't know it yet, the Black Sea Fleet is not in Sevastopol anymore. It's not even in the western part of the Black Sea anymore, because the Black Sea Fleet has been beaten by Ukraine. 30% of the ships of the Black Sea Fleet, they are on the ground of the Black Sea. By the way, south of Crimea, subtropical climate. So in a couple of years, this will be a wonderful diving area where you can watch the Russian warships being down there. 30% being sunk, and the rest of the Black Sea Fleet being retracted to Novorossiysk, a Russian port. And the question is, how did Ukraine do that? With the additional information that since 2014 and the illegal annexation of Crimea, Ukraine doesn't even have a navy. So how does a country without a navy sink 30% of the Black Sea Fleet and deter the rest of the Black Sea Fleet to move away? Ukraine did this with surveillance capabilities, with sensor and data fusion, with the use of advanced missiles and autonomous vehicles, with cruise missiles and overwater drones. And if you take the economic fundamentals, that's for everybody who knows that resources are limited, that's a very interesting point to look at. So the Neptune coastal defense missile that sunk the Russian flagship Moskva, of course, the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, had to be called Moskva. Moskva is one of the ships that is down on the ground of the Black Sea now. It was sunk by missiles. The value of the Moskva cruiser was around $750 million. The value of the Neptune missile was around $75 million. That's quite good economy. The Russian landing ship Cesar Kunikov, with a value of around $350 million, was sunk by an overwater drone that is called Magura, self-built, self-invented by the Ukrainian intelligence services during the war. And the production cost of a Magura drone are a little bit under $300,000. That's good economy again. My point here being autonomous vehicles and the use of AI models to support your warfare effort, they change the economy of war. There is a new economy of warfare. And the new economy of warfare is also described by the element that in former times you had long-term military research and development, and then maybe later, after the military products, there would be commercialization of your military research and development. Now it's the other way around. We see the militarization of cheap, commercially available technology, because everything that is in a Magura drone is something you can buy for other purposes. It was just repurposed for military purposes. The consequences for procurement, for military planning, for military doctrine, for structures of armed forces and naval forces and training are enormous. We have to, I think, learn those lessons. And it also means you do not have to be afraid of countries with a lot of ships and a big navy, because if you can sink them or deter them with relatively cheap instruments, they might be much less of a threat than they believe. The second example I want to talk about briefly is the example of sensor and data fusion. The Ukrainians are doing something that has never been done before. They are using data that is coming from commercial satellite images that they, for example, get also from the European Union, from commercial satellite images you can buy from certain companies who provide a service, military intelligence data, data from forward observers, but also data from mobile phones of Ukrainian citizens who are just taking photos or videos and sending them to the Ukrainian intelligence services. They are fusing all the data not only to have better situational awareness, but to use them for operational targeting. This is not something that has been done before by our armed forces, by other armed forces. It was theoretically thought of being possible. The Ukrainians are doing this in the war, by the way, by attracting talent. I mean, it's homeland defense. So everybody, for example, who produced and programmed video games in Ukraine, very strong video game industry, everybody of video game industry of Ukraine is now working in the armed forces and in homeland defense. That's an enormous brain trust, but totally new creative ideas about warfare and about military solutions. They bring new solutions to known military problems. The solutions are also cheaper. The data fusion in Ukrainian battlefield management systems very often uses all the data to identify targets and then to prioritize targets very pragmatically by their value in money and by their reproduction time. So you shoot the targets first that are most expensive and that take the longest time to reproduce for the enemy. That's a very smart approach. It's an approach that I think also alludes to the economy of warfare question that I mentioned, but it points to something that we need to think about by planning our forces, planning our command and control, how we will be able to fuse all the data, also to incorporate public data and open source intelligence into our military intelligence data, use the population for gathering information and then use the information for situational awareness and targeting. To summarize the 2 points about economy of war and data fusion and sensor fusion, I think who wants to have a military advantage in the naval area in the future does not have to look too much to aircraft carriers, carrier strike groups, fleets, tonnage. I think the focus has to shift to permanent surveillance, connectivity, data fusion, data analysis, and mobility, speed, and precision. Because with mobility, speed, and precision, you can beat mass. I think that is what we are seeing in the Ukrainian defense against Ukraine. And one last point, since I still have 40 seconds, on artificial intelligence. Ukraine is very successful in adapting AI models that were developed for something completely else to warfare. They are not developing the language models or the image models by themselves. They are taking them from somewhere. And there have been policies in the European Union for a long time where we thought making things open source is something that can help. But making things open source can mean for AI models that somebody can take them, repurpose them, and use them for very dangerous purposes. So homeland defense of Ukraine is something that I can agree with. But somebody else, a terrorist organization, a malign actor, a rogue state, using AI models that we developed for certain purposes, repurposes them, and uses them for targeting or for other dangerous purposes. So I agree with what Dimitrios said. There is no auto-correction or auto-regulation. And I think for the most advanced AI models that will be used for warfare, we need to have a very serious conversation that is similar to non-proliferation discussions we had when it came to certain types of weapons. I'm not sure if the United Nations can play a role in that. After seeing Secretary General Guterres in Kazan yesterday, I have my doubts about the United Nations, to be honest. But maybe there should be a start of a conversation between the most advanced actors in AI, which is the United States and China, about proliferation and non-proliferation of potentially dangerous, in a war sense, AI models. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, Jane, we've heard a lot today about the risks, the opportunities, the efficiencies of technology coming into play. But we've also heard a lot over the last day and a half about gray zone tactics, risks to stability, safety, in shipping, and in conflict in the South China Sea. Can you bring to bear your knowledge as a maritime security expert, what this technology advancements and this technological competition will mean for the South China Sea?
Ambassador, if my answer is no, can I get off the stage now? A very good day, one and all. A quick word of thanks to DAV for the very generous invitation and warm hospitality. A quick shout out to my good friend Hong San and Lanan for the opportunity to participate in this conference. So I come on this panel with a view of the inevitability of AI in all segments of our life, including maritime domain, but that's the extent of my competency on AI. So apologize if I have to dumb down the discussion a little bit here. So not being an expert on disruptive technology or arms control in that sense, right? What I plan to do is really just, as the ambassador said, share with you how a maritime security analyst, maybe this maritime security analyst, think about our collective quest for technology, and also, how do we fuse this into the topic of South China Sea? So I plan to do that in three broad areas. First, we have already heard about some of the exciting potential for the changes that we will need, relying on new technology in the advancements of maritime safety and security. So I'll pitch in my 2 cents on that. Number 2, I will talk a little bit about the challenges that I see in the MARSEC domain, which to me are plenty. And number 3, I'll try to sketch in my view where this topic sits in the maritime security discourse in Southeast Asia. So if you are impatient like me and you plan to zone out in the next few minutes, just know that, my only point here is that to me, the discussion on disruptive technology and the discussion on maritime security in South China Sea is currently running on 2 parallel tracks, right? So of course, there are some overlaps, but usually in the maritime security track, new and emerging technology is only discussed in part, or sometimes, or most of the time, in the last part of an agenda, mainly because of what are some of the preoccupations. And we have heard, discussions since the beginning of this conference yesterday. What are some of the broader preoccupations when we're talking about the South China dispute? Great power rivalry, balance of maritime power, the roles of regional institutions, and the rule of law. So on to the task at hand. The first segment on, what are some of the exciting futures. We have already heard about, all the exciting futures and the advantages in investing in this technology, and just looking at the current generation of smart ships, right? Where some of the systems are already fully automated, and the various unmanned platforms, big and small, already deployed both commercially and by law enforcement agencies. Some of the key attributes, in my view, of course, apart from reducing the need of manpower, as the professor have highlighted, the reduce of costs, and more importantly, risk. So one functional area that I was thinking of that we need in Southeast Asia, at least, to invest more in AI is what Nicole already talked about in terms of MDA and information fusion. I think in that sense, especially when we are talking about maritime threats and challenges, especially the non-traditional maritime threats and challenges, so this is a very low bar when we are thinking of safety and security, is where we do need to invest a little bit more in terms of MDA, in terms of the AI capacity in MDA. So of course, there are various info-sharing platforms and info-fusion platforms in this region that are already in operation, collecting and collating data. But in my mind, there's still room to improve when it comes to the sense-making component. Again, echoing what Nicole has already mentioned. So while the descriptive AI are already, can already identify, understand, classify some of this data, when it comes to the sense-making sector, at least in Southeast Asia, I realized that within the platforms that we have, the predictive and the prescriptive AI component is one that is not fully developed. It's something that we can learn, from other regions, right? More importantly, in my mind, many of these platforms that we are currently using in this part of the world requires the human administrator to set the perimeters, right? And to me, there is always going to be inadequacy and bias because we are really limited to what we know already. Which brings me to the second part, to highlight some of the challenges, right? Especially if we are thinking about military AI. So the first group of challenge or the questions that I have for this particular panel is slightly more technical, and I think some of the presentation already answered the questions that I have. First, I spoke about human biases, right? And I want to link this to the quality of the data. So some of the data that we are already receiving when it comes to maritime and safety and security. So since, in my mind at least, the AI algorithm learns from data. Again, I learned from the professor. Am I right to say then the bias or inaccurate data input will inevitably lead to bias and inaccurate assessment and decision, right? And when that happens, if the autonomous system makes a mistake, who is accountable, right? Question about, whether these systems are vulnerable to cyber attacks, right? And therefore, human manipulation again. So I'm also under the impression that there's currently no global standards to AI development. Again, I stand corrected. So integration and interoperability might be a problem, even between partners, right? So apologies for the layman term. I'm really thinking about the Mac and Windows comparison here to the very basic level, right? I was going to ask whether there's already an arms race in the AI realm, but yesterday we have a very bright young leader who already raised this. So kudos to DAV for investing in the next generation. We already spotted a rising star there. So the second set of questions that I have, and really raising challenges, is to me more problematic, right? And again, some of these already raised. What is the right balance between human oversight and autonomy, especially in military users of AI? So I mentioned accountability earlier, and I worry about mistakes, right? Especially where there can be biases or human manipulation, especially, again, keep emphasizing military users. So I have in mind, lethal autonomous weapons. So again, the example that I have, which Nico already mentioned, is really a AI system-enabled navigation and targeting of, for example, hypersonic weapons, for that matter, right? But again, since those are beyond my competency, I'll go to, what are some of the current discussion in this part of the world, which is really focused on unmanned systems, which earlier on I was quite excited about, being a new technology, but I'm kind of stuck. Why? Because we have heard there is increased interest and also concern about the proliferation of some of these unmanned systems. We already saw, reports of unidentified unmanned submersibles and gliders in regional waters deployed for unknown purposes, found by navies and fishermen alike, right? The concern of the lack of rules and regulations that can regulate some of these systems. And some very basic questions that we are asking in this part of the world is, what is the legal status ascribed to these platforms and systems, right? Since there's no universal classification yet, even the IMO is working on the mass classification right now. So whether this can be applied to military ones, what rights and duties do these vessels and platforms have with regards to navigation? So whether or not, UNCLOS can regulate the grays as well. And whether such autonomous platforms should be recognized as part of the aircraft or vessels that is deployed from. So the mothership, right? Should this be part of the mothership? The reason I ask this is because can this be accorded sovereign immunity? Can they fly a flag independently? So reading the updated US Commander's Handbook, right, on the laws of naval operation that was updated 2 years ago, I think I learned the US perspective on some of these questions that I have. Because one of the major components that was updated 2 years ago was indeed on operations of unmanned and autonomous systems. Unfortunately, when trying to raise this particular topic, I realized that, it's not many in Southeast Asia is aware of this amendment and updates to the US Commander's Handbook, yeah? So to be clear, I'm referencing to the US Commander's Handbook really just as an example. As an example of how one country, one major maritime power, has already stated its position. And it may be worthwhile for the rest of us in this part of the world to study these policy more closely, since the US do operate very extensively in Southeast Asian waters, right? And this brings me to my third and final point, Mr. Moderator, to weave this topic of AI into the discussion in the South China Sea and maritime security more broadly in Southeast Asia. So I mentioned earlier on that my sense is that the discussion on disruptive technology and maritime security is currently still running on two separate tracks with limited overlap. So kudos to DAV for bringing this panel here to help us think through implications of these emerging technology in some of the long-standing maritime disputes that we have in this part of the world. My friends in the room will know that I'm currently obsessed with the question about, lessons learned from conflict in the Red and Black Sea, and what are the implications, the future of naval warfare and conflict in this part of the world. But like it or not, this line of inquiry actually in this part of the world has attracted a lot of criticisms on me, saying that I'm too realist in the IR sense. So if I can just shelf war out of the mind. Shelf war out of my mind, ditch the earlier scenario that I have about AI-enabled hypersonic weapons, right? So given the current tension in the South China Sea, it's not unimaginable, of course, for one of the claimant states to send an unmanned patrol vessels to assert its claim. Full specs with cameras, video, water cannons, guns. Should we view these as escalatory or de-escalatory? And what if both sides deployed unmanned and autonomous vessels? If we take the human out of the picture, can we be less concerned about water cannons attacks and ramming? But the fact that, I'm asking this particular question reveals that, I'm really no expert on laws of armed conflict, because a lawyer would point out that, the human factor is only one variable in the assessment of the threshold of the use of force, as we heard in the earlier panel. So I'm looking at, the panels of lawyers earlier on, so if you have any difficult questions, ask them, please. Another relevant question very quickly here, which is, again, beyond my competency, is how the emergence of disruptive military technologies, especially AI, will change the discourse on arms control and disarmament discussion, especially in Southeast Asia, where the Southeast Asian country will change our minds about arms control and mainly because, there are some prevailing, positions taken, especially when it comes to the nuclear and non-proliferation discussion. But when it comes to, emerging technology, whether these countries may change their mind in terms of the need for control and disarmament. So again, I will echo, the panels to say that the rules and norms building is something that we really need to think about more seriously in this part of the world. And when it comes to governance in the broader maritime domain is one conversation that we need to start infusing more in Southeast Asia. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you, Jane. I think you've articulated many of the thoughts that are on the minds of all of us when we're thinking about AI, the use of drones, and what that might mean when you've already got so much ambiguity and gray zone in the South China Sea. Just another layer of complexity to this already complex situation. So we'll open it up for questions. And I've got one over here and one in the far back corner. Let's start over here.
Thank you. I have a general question to the panel, and I have a specific comment directed to Mr. Liko Lange. The general comment or question to the panel is that for the first time in modern history, we see the rapid development of technology that can be applied very quickly at low cost. It's affordable, cheap, low cost, and can be disseminated rapidly and can end up into the wrong hands. Now, what happens when this technology is disseminated, for example, to terrorists and states with a grievance against the international order? Yesterday, we heard about the Houthi rebels using Iranian-supplied drones against shipping in the Red Sea. Now, what happens, for example, if the Somali pirates get hold of these drones? And I can imagine a situation where North Korea can threaten its neighbors with hordes of drones. Forget about nuclear weapons. Nuclear weapons are dirty, and nuclear weapons come under international sanction, but drones do not. It can slip out of international sanctions, Security Council Security Council. Sanctions by reliance on this kind of technology threaten its neighbors, South Korea and Japan, and what will the rest of the world be able to do about it? That's the general comment. The specific one to Nico Langer. Now, I echo your thoughts. I think you're right that what you say in terms of the development of this technology will have a dramatic effect upon naval strategy in particular, not land warfare, not so much land warfare, but certainly in the maritime domain, naval strategy will be affected, recruitment, training patterns, all this will be dramatically affected. And I could add to this, for example, the notion of ocean transparency. We had a study done in my university on ocean transparency, which predicted that by the year 2050, ocean transparency will become a reality, which will make the submarine obsolete, not ocean-wide, but in areas of deployment. Submarines will become detectable. Now, my direct comment to all of this, which I agree, I'm not contesting what you say in any way, but in the conference we had quite recently in my center, the issue of application came up because navies are notoriously conservative, and they will defend their training, defend their tactics and strategy. It's going to take years for navies to adapt to this kind of technology. I can envision it, and when adapted by certain navies, it'll be done haphazardly. Some will be quick off the mark. I'm told my colleague in the American Navy tells me that they're moving very quickly with the adoption of this technology, but the other navies will be very slow and they'll be left behind. So it'll take years for this to filter through the system to very conservative naval services.
Thank you. I'm going to remind folks as we take the questions, one question. And because the acoustics up here are a little bit difficult, if you could speak really clearly and slowly into your microphone so that all of the panelists can hear. So I had a question way in the back. Yeah.
Thank you very much to the panelists and the DAV for organizing this very interesting panel. My name is Pat. I'm the Deputy Head of Region for the ICRC based in Bangkok. And I think the discussions here touch upon some of the work that we've been doing regionally and globally on autonomous weapon systems. Namely, we've been working with like-minded states and the UN to reiterate that human users must be able to supervise, intervene, and deactivate these autonomous weapon systems if needed. And our position is mainly to restrict the type of autonomous weapon systems that are anti-personnel in nature. So my question is, given the increasing development and deployment of AWS in conflicts across the globe today, how can states ensure that these technologies comply with IHL, otherwise known as the laws of armed conflict, particularly on the principles of distinction, proportionality, accountability, and precaution? Thank you.
Thank you. I think I had, yes, Dr. Kirkberg.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Sarah Kirchberger. I'm actually a naval analyst by profession, so I would like to add in on this discussion we just had about consequences for procurement from AI. And I would like to add a note of caution to the idea that AI and drones are such a fundamental technological shift that everything else becomes somehow obsolete. I don't believe that is true. If you look at the history of naval weapons and weapons development in general, you will note that the development of weapons and countermeasures always moves in tandem. So there's usually at some point a new development, and then countermeasures maybe catch up, and then new weapons development becomes necessary, and so on. And in this phase that we're right now in, we have this, a new type of weapon to deal with. The Russian Black Fleet was probably caught wrong-footed and was not particularly well equipped to deal with this unexpected, probably, threat from their point of view. This does not necessarily mean that 10 years from now the situation would be exactly the same, because I anticipate that countermeasure development will now be the focus for many, many countries, and including weapons, using cyber weapons to disrupt communication between drone swarms, laser weapons to fight off, aerial drones, and so on. So we can expect there something catch-up movement. And also, we should remember, not every war looks exactly like this war, where Ukraine is basically defending its coastline, defending its own territory against an invasion. There are different scenarios, and big naval platforms can be deployed globally. They can do a lot of things that are not necessarily all, the same. And I believe the direction of development might be more like towards drone carriers, for instance, to integrate drones with naval platforms and so on. I would just like to add this note of caution to the discussion, not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because I think 15 years ago we believed everyone would only be fighting pirates, and all our Cold War era naval weapon systems were obsolete, and look, where would we be with them today without naval vessels able to fight off ballistic missiles in the Red Sea, for instance?
Thank you for that. So we've had a couple of comments that I'll summarize, but maybe we can take one more question for this round. Debbie?
Thank you. This is a very layman question, but listening to all of this, I'd like to follow up on what Nico and Jane was saying about norm buildings and regulations. Clearly, when Nico mentioned about if we need to control it, clearly this is very different from biological or chemical weapons, because this is dual use. There are benefits, but there are also dangers. So where should we start? Nico, you are a bit skeptical about taking it to the wider multilateral system that is not functioning very well right now. Now, Jane, you are talking about regional ones. So is it possible to do it at the regional level first? Or should we just start talking at it at the global level and looking at it at the dual use, when it applies to civilian use and when it applies to military use, Because this is completely new, where would we start? Thank you.
So we've got a couple of competing comments there. I mean, one aspect says navies are very slow to adapt, and this is going to cause problems and maybe some asymmetry in threats. Another view that countermeasures are inevitable, that situations will change. And then a question about how do we apply international humanitarian law in the development and use of these new technologies, and where do we start in controlling their use? So, Nico, I'm going to start with you, but I might call on others as well.
I will try to pick a few aspects that I'm ready to answer, and not answer on others where I do not feel qualified doing it. I have a general remark to the regulation discussion and the norms discussion. I feel at unease with this, because the point I was trying to make is this is already happening. So there is a contradiction between the theoretical discussion of regulating certain developments while they are already used on the battlefield. I come from a country, Germany, where the German government was under the illusion that Germany could have a global regime discussing the use of armed drones while Germany was not able to procure armed drones themselves. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous. Why should somebody who has armed drones already start a conversation with us about a regulation or an international regime? And we live, I think, just at the beginning of a development where not only, but also because of new technological possibilities, political decision makers have the feeling that wars can be won. We have seen this between Azerbaijan and Armenia. We see the attempt by Russia against Ukraine. I'm afraid there will be more attempts. So as a military person, I would focus on the question how to win the war first before I discuss theoretical, sorry for saying that way, theoretical discussions of norms and regimes and all that, because we might be in a very defensive or very bad position until we arrive there. On what we heard about navies adopting, I mean, the Black Sea Fleet, 30% of the Black Sea Fleet, regardless of what we are discussing, they are underwater now. So there is a real impact of what is going on. But I agree with you that the challenge for naval strategies, naval warfare concepts, doctrine, structure, and training of naval forces is that you have to be able to combine the conventional means that you would be using for naval power projection globally or for military naval capabilities with those new capabilities. And since resources are limited, you cannot do everything you did conventionally and do the new stuff on top. You have to integrate it. And the integration is done quickly in a country such as Ukraine because you are under the pressure of homeland defense. And I agree with you, if you are not having that pressure, then there is a huge reluctance to adapt the new stuff into your doctrine, structure, and training, and you might be not capable against actors who are using the technology to their advantage. In procurement, there is one important change. I think in addition to maritime platforms, there will be a significant element of consumables that yet you have to be able to use, to consume, to throw away, and to reproduce. So it's not about a one-time procurement, it is about keeping procurement and productions running for permanent supplies to the battlefields to have consumables you use in war. And that is a concept that is for military planners and for procurement agencies very difficult to grapple. So maybe new institutions are needed for that. Ukraine found a solution that I find at least interesting because Ukraine decided, after trying to adapt those things, decided we need a separate branch of our armed forces that is a branch only for unmanned vehicles. And we introduce unmanned vehicles training for all forces. We have an academy for unmanned vehicles training, and everybody has to undergo training there. But to have the separate branch to adapt more quickly and not to try it within the established branches. And the last aspect I want to mention is, which is something that sometimes for those in question is very unpleasant to hear, the Ukrainian commander-in-chief, General Syrskyi, made a very brave decision when he was appointed commander-in-chief, by not taking the generals who were in line for promotion as his deputies, but pulling up 2 colonels who were 20 years younger with a different mindset, with a different approach to technology, and pulling them up and elevating them to his deputies. So bringing in new people with a different mindset, with a different technology approach into established military and political structures, that is, I think, something that helps. But that needs a lot of bravery, because I think all the generals between the commander-in-chief and the 2 colonels, they were not very much in favor of that decision. So it's a leadership question as well.
In the same way, I can speak about the cost of war in the same idea as you developed before. And the same idea you developed, the cost of war, about crisis, it's accelerated the rhythm of technology and created new technology more and more and more. As the example for Ukraine, we can speak about Red Sea and asymmetric and generalization of drones. As I said, it's costless and really simple to use. And about the cost of war, example for United States to shoot down the drones of Houthi, it was about nearly $1 million to use some missiles to shoot down the small drones. And it makes a reflection about the balance of cost of war, and it's the economic part and the hurt of drones is to put far away the human from the loop. So we have discussion about law and proportionality. So first of all, of this technology it put off far. With the players, with drones, it depends if you are a democracy or not. So it's challenging for democracy not to close emerging technologies and innovation. And other part, respecting rules. And it's important to develop these rules facing this speeding, accelerating cycle of technology. So the war, the crisis, really have an impact to develop this technology, as we saw for Ukraine, and to be resilient over that. And there is the question about how to counter, because there is new technology, and how to face this technology. For Ukraine, they lose about 6,000 drones per month. So they're always resilient with that, and it shows how it's emerging. For the maritime domain, it's going more and more because there are more and more interest and crises in this cycle with unmanned system, because there is really adapted to this special environment, because you have a lot of size of drones with different propelled hybrid drones with a lot of shape and autonomous or not, so they can answer to a lot of situations. So there is a really challenging context about using this technology, and to find this right balance, and the challenge is really high, I think.
Thank you, Ibu, for that question. Two parts to your question. First is that in my mind, at least, for someone who don't understand AI, I do wonder whether, the discussion of control and disarmament is a bit premature, because, whilst we have heard of some of the real challenges and risks, but do we really understand the full extent of the possibility? I think that's one that I'm a bit resistant. But on your point about, whether there can be a regional rules and norms, I'm one who ascribe to laws, rules, and regulation must have universal interpretation and consistent application worldwide. So it has to be international in that sense, which is also why, when I raised the question on the regional concerns, is because in my mind, when we discuss about the nuclear context and non-proliferation, that technology is not available or not within grasp of Southeast Asia. So the positions can be very clear. But when it comes to these emerging and AI, these technologies are within grasp for some of the Southeast Asian countries. And therefore, whether the discussion of control and disarmament is whether these countries would take the same stand on this issue is one that I question. So where would they sit in this broader discussion, which I don't have answer to. But if I can jump into the point that Dr. Kirchberger has mentioned, in my mind, I'm fully with you. Because if we are looking at the naval modernization programs in this part of the world, it has not changed. I think the aspiration for conventional platforms are still there. Right? So of course, now that some of these technologies are, again, accessible and a bit more affordable, it's at best be seen as supplementary. So an example is the Singapore plans for the multi-role combat vessel, right? It's going to have the drone and the unmanned, vessels, etc., but it's a combat vessel. It will have the conventional weapon systems with the AI function in it. So that, I think, is still going to be the preoccupation for Southeast Asian navies when it comes to procurement in the near and medium term. Thank you.
I want to go to a final round, but Nico, if you wanted to comment briefly.
Just because I forgot to answer to one, I think, very important point that was raised. I think one of the consequences of the developments I described is that there has to be rapid development when it comes to defense against unmanned vehicles, and there is the economy of war aspect as well. So bringing down the costs of air defense, bringing down the costs of defense of unmanned vehicles is tremendously important, because otherwise the economy is working in favor of the aggressor if the aggressor is using cheap consumables for attack. That has consequences for all maritime platforms that are already there, that has consequences for all maritime platforms that have been procured and take eternity to build, and that has consequences for all that will be built in the future. But the technological solutions for cheap defense against consumable cheap attacks are not there yet. Yes, there are lasers and there are experiments with them, there are rapid fire guns, but one, I think, fundamental question is of importance here. If you talk about infrastructures, if you talk about valuable assets, if you talk about buildings, if you talk about maritime platforms, I think you have to think surveillance, drone detection, and drone defense while you are constructing those things. It is not only a war element, it has to protect civil infrastructures as well.
Thank you. Demetrios, I know you want to get in. I'm going to take another couple of questions and then let you lead.
Let me answer.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, hello again. I will try to cover the whole spectrum. I am Greek. It's a mistake to give the microphone to a Greek. We have the tendency not to stop talking. But in any case, let's combine question 1 and 3 together. Many years ago, Thukydides and Herodotus said a statement in the form, war is the father of all inventions. It is necessity that is forcing us to think in an innovative way. So, Nico, the Ukrainian necessity forced them to think differently than the rich Germans. For our Australian friend with the Polish name, forget me, I cannot pronounce it, but I will say, the side that has the technology advantage is always winning. World War I gave us tank and the creation of the Air Force branch. World War II gave us Blitzkrieg. The new war, whatever you want to call it, is giving us something different. I have even suggested in a publication of mine that was peer-reviewed in the American Yearbook of International Law that it is time to start talking about dronefare as a specific branch of the electronic warfare. As for the culture of the branch, the older the branch and the greater the tradition, it is more difficult to change. So I do acknowledge the comment. Army officers change more difficult than naval officers that consider themselves flexible, clever, and beautiful. Remember James Bond and his arrogance. And the Air Force officers that are more prone to change because the branch is newer, so it's more adaptable to change. Last but not least, to borrow an argument from Nico and our Australian friend, every action creates a reaction. So yes, indeed, we have drones, but now we are investigating the use of direct energy weapons or lasers that will bring the cost of shooting down a drone to $3. Therefore, your figures will be reversed. And of course, we are also experimenting with shielding, a Star Wars concept that, in very simple terms, no matter the Neptune missile or the Harpoon missile, no matter the drone, if you approach a specific distance from the vessel, it will automatically explode. And that will bring back the masters from the 70s, like Moskva, to the forefront, because a Moskva shielded is a totally different animal. I hope that is enough. No, it's not enough. I am in favor of the global. If we go regional, we will lose the opportunity, and those that are not included in the regional will use it against in the global scale. That is from me.
Thank you, Demetrios. Look, this is my 3rd year moderating at this forum, and I have not gone over time in the past previous years, so I'm not going to do it again. With apologies to those who had their arms up, with apologies to those who posted online, we'll wrap it up. But I just wanted to say a final word of hope, and I think picking up on what Demetrios said, there are efforts, however futile they may be, globally to negotiate terms and conditions for the use of artificial intelligence in weapon systems, and we need a global effort to make it happen. A commentator said yesterday, maybe China and the US can come together on negotiating non-proliferation issues. Maybe this is it. Maybe this is the area that we need to come together on to have an agreed solution. Thank you to all our panelists for very enthusiastic presentations, and thanks to all of you.
Speaking of digitalization, can I have the QR? Oh, okay. Please scan the QR code because this is secure your access to the boat, which we'll be embark on later. you will be asked for the receipt of the survey completions. Joke aside, for the interest of time, we'll come back here at 2:45 sharp for the final sessions of the 16th South China Sea Conference. Thank you, Ambassador, and thank you, your panelists, once again. See you in 10 minutes.